The wagon rattled into Tonopah Junction, Nevada under a burning June sun in 1883, carrying a preacher's daughter who had finally stopped pretending to be perfect. Hannah Katherine Morrison pressed her hand against the wooden seat as the wheels jolted over another rut in the dusty Main Street. Her dark hair already escaping the tight bun her mother had insisted upon that morning. She could still hear her father's voice from their parsonage in Carson City, stern and unyielding as always. "A woman's place is beside a godly man, Hannah. Silas Whitmore has asked for your hand, and you will accept him. He is a deacon, a man of standing. You are 20 years old. This foolishness ends now." But foolishness, as her father called it, felt like the only honest thing left inside her. She had spent 2 decades being the model daughter, the one who smiled sweetly at church socials, who kept her opinions locked behind her teeth, who never danced or laughed too loudly or asked uncomfortable questions about why God would create people with curious minds if he expected them never to use them. Silas Whitmore was 43 years old with thin lips and colder eyes, and when he looked at her, she saw nothing but a vision of what he wanted her to become. Another silent fixture in his perfect, joyless household. So she had taken the small inheritance from her grandmother, the one her father could not legally touch, and bought passage on the first stage heading east. Tonopah Junction was barely a town, just a collection of buildings that had sprung up around a silver mine and the dreams of men who thought they could pull fortune from the earth. It was exactly the kind of place where a woman could disappear, could become someone new. The stage pulled to a stop outside the Wells Fargo office, and Hannah climbed down, her legs unsteady after hours of travel. The heat hit her like a physical wall, so different from the milder climate of Carson City. Dust coated everything, turning the world sepia-toned and ancient. Men moved along the wooden sidewalks, their faces weathered and hard. A saloon called the Silver Dollar sat across the street, its painted sign already fading under the relentless sun. "Miss Morrison." A woman's voice cut through the ambient noise of the street. Hannah turned to find a solid-built woman in her 50s approaching, her face kind despite the stern set of her mouth. "I am Margaret Turner. You answered my advertisement for a schoolteacher." "Yes." Hannah's voice came out stronger than she felt. "Yes, I did." Margaret looked her over with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You are younger than I expected. The letter said you had experience teaching." "I taught Sunday school for 5 years," Hannah said, which was true enough. She had also educated herself far beyond what her father thought appropriate for a woman, reading every book she could acquire, studying mathematics and literature and history when she was supposed to be practicing needlework. "I can teach reading, writing, arithmetic, geography, and history. I can also teach music if you have an instrument." Margaret's expression softened slightly. "We have a piano in the church, though it is badly out of tune. Come, I will show you the schoolhouse and your lodgings. You look half dead from the journey." The schoolhouse was a simple building at the edge of town. One large room with a wood stove, a teacher's desk, and rough-hewn benches for the students. The attached quarters where Hannah would live consisted of a small bedroom, a sitting area with a table and 2 chairs, and a tiny kitchen. It was sparse and plain and absolutely perfect. "Classes start Monday," Margaret said. "We have 17 children, ages 6 to 14. Their parents work the mines or the ranches, and most of them cannot read beyond a basic level. You will have your work cut out for you." "I am not afraid of work," Hannah said, and meant it. Margaret studied her again with those penetrating eyes. "You are running from something." It was not a question. Hannah considered lying, then decided against it. "From expectations that would have suffocated me." Fair enough. "We all have our reasons for being here. Just know that Tonopah Junction may be small, but people talk. Keep yourself respectable and you will do fine." Margaret moved toward the door, then paused. "There is a Sunday service if you wish to attend. Pastor Wells is a good man, nothing like the hellfire preachers some towns get stuck with." After Margaret left, Hannah sat on the narrow bed and let herself breathe. Really breathe, deep and full, without the weight of judgment pressing on her chest. Through the window, she could see the vast Nevada desert stretching endlessly, the mountains purple in the distance. This was freedom. Raw and uncertain and absolutely terrifying, but freedom nonetheless. She spent the weekend organizing the schoolhouse, sweeping out months of accumulated dust, arranging the few books and slates Margaret had provided. On Sunday, she did attend the service, sitting in the back pew and observing the congregation. Pastor Wells was indeed mild-mannered. His sermon focused on charity and kindness rather than damnation. The townspeople were a mixed group, miners and their families, a few ranchers, the merchants who kept the town running. They eyed her with curiosity but not hostility. Monday morning arrived with crystal clarity, the sky so blue it hurt to look at. Hannah, dressed in her plainest dress, pinned her hair back severely and opened the schoolhouse doors at 8 o'clock sharp. The children arrived in groups, some walking from town, others brought by parents on horseback or in wagons from the surrounding ranches. They were shy at first, unsure of this new teacher with her soft voice and Carson City manners. "Good morning," Hannah said, standing before them with her hands clasped. "My name is Miss Morrison, and I am very pleased to meet all of you. We are going to learn many things together this year, but first, I would like to learn about you. Let us go around the room and each of you tell me your name and one thing you love." A small girl with braids raised her hand tentatively. "I am Lily Chen. I love horses." One by one, the children introduced themselves. Hannah listened carefully, filing away names and faces and interests. When they finished, she smiled. "Wonderful. Now, I have a secret to tell you. Learning is not meant to be boring. Anyone who told you it was lied to you. Learning is about discovering how the world works, about finding answers to the questions that keep you awake at night. So if something I teach confuses you or interests you or makes you wonder about something else entirely, I want you to speak up. Questions are not disrespectful. They are how we grow." She could see the surprise on their faces. Clearly, their previous teacher had taken a different approach. But as the morning progressed, teaching them basic grammar and arithmetic, she felt some of the tension leave their small shoulders. They began to engage, to ask those tentative questions, and Hannah felt something spark to life inside her. This was what she had been meant to do. Not sit silently beside a husband who valued obedience over thought, not smile and nod and suppress every original idea. This, teaching, opening minds. At noon, the children scattered for lunch, most running home or pulling out parcels their mothers had packed. Hannah sat at her desk, eating bread and cheese, when she heard hoofbeats outside. Through the window, she saw a man dismount from a rangy bay horse. He was tall and lean, wearing dusty work clothes and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. He tied the horse to the hitching post and approached the schoolhouse with an easy, rolling gait. Hannah stood as he knocked on the open door. "Miss Morrison." "Yes." He removed his hat, revealing sun-streaked brown hair and blue eyes that crinkled at the corners. His face was tanned and weathered, probably in his mid-20s, with the kind of quiet strength that came from years of hard work. "I am Benjamin Irving. I run a ranch about 5 miles north of town. Margaret Turner said you might be willing to give my sister some extra lessons. She is 12, but she reads at a much higher level than the other children her age, gets bored easily." "I would be happy to," Hannah said. What is her name? Cora. She is in class now, the girl with the red hair who sits by the window. Benjamin smiled slightly. She is probably driving you crazy with questions already. Hannah laughed, remembering the bright-eyed girl who had asked at least a dozen questions during the morning lessons. She is curious. That is a gift, not a burden. Something shifted in Benjamin's expression, a softening around the eyes. Not everyone sees it that way. Our last teacher told her to be quiet and accept what she was told. Then your last teacher was a fool. The words came out before Hannah could stop them, too sharp and too honest. She waited for Benjamin to take offense, to remind her that a proper woman did not speak so bluntly. Instead, he grinned. That is what I thought too, though I used stronger language. I am glad you are here, Miss Morrison. Cora needs someone who understands her. I will do my best, Hannah said. Perhaps she could stay after school 2 days a week. We could work on more advanced reading and composition. That would be perfect. I will pick her up at 4 on those days. Benjamin settled his hat back on his head. Thank you, truly. He left before Hannah could respond, swinging back into the saddle with practiced ease. She watched him ride away, struck by the genuine care in his voice when he spoke of his sister. It was not what she had expected from a rancher in a rough mining town. But then, she was learning that expectations were often just comfortable lies people told themselves about the world. The afternoon passed quickly, the children warming to her teaching methods. Cora Irving was indeed bright, finishing her assignments in half the time it took the others, and then pulling out a battered copy of Robinson Crusoe to read while she waited. When the final bell rang and the others scattered, Hannah called her over. Your brother asked if you might like some extra lessons, Hannah said. More challenging material, things that will make you think. Cora's entire face lit up. Really? You would do that? I would enjoy it. We could read together, discuss ideas, perhaps work on your writing. Would you like that? Yes, the girl practically bounced with excitement. Miss Morrison, can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you become a teacher? I mean, most women just get married. Hannah considered the question carefully. Because I believe that mine should not be wasted. Yours, mine, anyone's. And because teaching feels like the most important work I could do. Does that make sense? Cora nodded vigorously. My brother says the same thing. He says just because I am a girl does not mean I should not understand how the world works. But Pa used to say I had no business filling my head with foolish ideas. Where is your father now? Hannah asked gently. Dead. 2 years ago. Mine collapse. Cora's voice was matter-of-fact, but Hannah caught the flicker of old pain in her eyes. It is just Benjamin and me now. He is a good brother. He makes sure I stay in school even though some of the ranchers say he should put me to work. I am glad he does, Hannah said. You have a gift, Cora. Do not let anyone convince you otherwise. Over the following weeks, Hannah settled into the rhythm of Tonopah Junction. She taught her students with a passion that surprised even herself, finding ways to make lessons engaging and relevant. She held extra sessions with Cora twice a week, and the girl devoured every book Hannah could provide, discussing philosophy and adventure stories with equal enthusiasm. Benjamin came to collect his sister on those afternoons, and gradually he began to linger. At first, it was just polite conversation. How were the students doing? Did Hannah need anything for the school? But slowly, the conversations deepened. Benjamin told her about the ranch, about the hard work of running it alone after his father's death, about his dreams of expanding the herd and maybe breeding horses. Hannah found herself talking about things she had never spoken aloud before. Her frustration with the narrow roles women were expected to fill, her love of learning, her belief that questions mattered more than easy answers. You know, Benjamin said one afternoon as they stood outside the schoolhouse watching Cora play with some of the younger children. "You are not like any woman I have ever met." Hannah tensed, waiting for the criticism that usually followed such observations. But Benjamin's tone held only curiosity and something that might have been admiration. "Is that a problem?" she asked carefully. "No." He looked at her directly, those blue eyes serious. "It is refreshing. Most people say what they think others want to hear. You say what you actually think. It is honest. Honesty is not always appreciated. Maybe not. But it is rare enough to be valuable." He paused, then added, "Would you like to see the ranch sometime? Cora has been begging me to invite you for Sunday dinner. I am not much of a cook, but I can manage a decent roast." Hannah knew she should refuse. It would not be proper, dining alone at a bachelor's ranch, even with his sister present as a chaperone. People would talk. Margaret Turner would hear about it within hours. But looking at Benjamin's open, honest face, at Cora's hopeful expression as she ran over to join them, Hannah found she did not care about proper. "I would like that very much," she said. The following Sunday, Benjamin arrived at the schoolhouse in a wagon freshly washed for the occasion. Hannah wore her best dress, a simple blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes, and tried not to feel nervous. This was just dinner, just a friendly gesture, nothing more. The ranch house was small but well built, sitting in a valley with good grazing land stretching in all directions. Cattle dotted the hillsides, and Hannah could see a large barn and several corrals. Benjamin helped her down from the wagon with a gentlemanly hand, and Cora immediately grabbed her arm to give her a tour. "Benjamin built most of this himself," Cora said proudly as they walked through the barn. "After Pa died, everyone said he should sell the ranch, that he was too young to run it alone. He was only 23, but he proved them all wrong." The barn was clean and organized, tools hung neatly on the walls, the horses sleek and healthy in their stalls. It spoke of someone who took pride in his work, who cared about doing things properly. Back at the house, Benjamin had indeed prepared a roast, along with potatoes and carrots and fresh bread that he admitted sheepishly he had bought from the baker in town. They ate at the simple wooden table, and Hannah felt herself relaxing in a way she never had at her father's meticulously formal dinners. Here, conversation flowed naturally. Cora chattered about a book she was reading, and Benjamin told stories about the ranch, about the stubborn cow who kept escaping her pen, and the wild mustangs he sometimes saw running in the distant hills. Hannah contributed her own stories about the students and their progress, about the small victories of watching comprehension dawn in young eyes. "You love it," Benjamin observed. "Teaching." "I do," Hannah admitted. "More than I expected to. Back in Carson City, I taught Sunday school, but it was always within such strict boundaries. Here, I can actually teach the way I believe learning should happen." "Why did you leave Carson City?" Cora asked with the directness of youth. "It is a much bigger town than this." Hannah hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. But there was something about this house, about these two people, that invited honesty. "My father is a preacher. He had very specific ideas about what my life should look like. I had different ideas." Benjamin's eyes met hers across the table, understanding flickering in their depths. "I know something about that. My father wanted me to work in the mines like him. Said ranching was a fool's dream, that the land here was too harsh. We fought about it constantly." "Do you regret it?" Hannah asked. "Choosing your own path, not for a moment. Even when it is hard, even when I am up all night with a sick calf or spending days mending fence line in the heat, I know this is what I am meant to do." He paused. "I imagine you feel the same about teaching." "I do." The simple acknowledgement felt like a revelation. This was what had been missing in Carson City, in her father's house, in the life that had been planned for her. The freedom to choose her own meant to be, rather than accepting someone else's version of it. After dinner, Cora showed Hannah her small collection of books, and they discussed the finer points of Treasure Island while Benjamin cleaned up the kitchen. When the sun began to sink toward the horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson, Benjamin drove Hannah back to town. Cora had fallen asleep in the back of the wagon, and for a while they rode in comfortable silence. "Thank you for coming," Benjamin said finally. "It meant a lot to Cora, to both of us. Thank you for inviting me. Your home is lovely." "It is just a ranch." "No," Hannah said. "It is a place you built with your own hands, following your own vision. That makes it remarkable." Benjamin glanced at her, something warm in his expression. "You see things differently than most people. Is that your polite way of saying I am strange?" "It is my honest way of saying you notice what matters." He guided the wagon down the main street of Tonopah Junction, quiet now in the gathering dusk. "Hannah, can I ask you something?" The use of her first name sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. "Yes. You ever get lonely?" "Being here, far from everything you knew," she considered the question. "Sometimes. But I was lonelier in Carson City, surrounded by people who thought they knew exactly who I should be. Here I can at least be lonely as myself." "You do not have to be lonely at all," Benjamin said quietly. "If you do not want to be." He pulled the wagon to a stop outside the schoolhouse. In the dim light, his face was half-shadowed, but his eyes were steady on hers. Hannah's heart hammered against her ribs. She knew what he was offering, not just companionship, but something deeper. The possibility of connection, of being seen and valued for who she actually was rather than who she was supposed to be. "I would like that," she whispered. "Not being lonely." Benjamin smiled, and it transformed his entire face. "Good. Then maybe next Sunday, if you are free, we could go riding. There are some beautiful trails in the foothills, places where you can see for miles. I am not much of a rider. I will teach you, if you are willing to learn." Hannah thought about her father, about what he would say if he could see her now, contemplating horseback rides with a cowboy rancher in the Nevada desert. The old Hannah, the obedient daughter, would have refused, would have recognized the impropriety and stepped back behind safe boundaries. "I am willing," she said. Over the next months, Hannah's life took on a shape she had never imagined possible. She taught her students with growing confidence, watching them blossom under her encouragement. She met with Cora for their special sessions, and the girl's mind proved as hungry and capable as Hannah had suspected. And she spent her Sundays with Benjamin, learning to ride, exploring the wild country around Tonopah Junction, talking about everything and nothing. Benjamin was unlike any man she had known. He never tried to diminish her intelligence or redirect her questions. When she expressed an opinion, he listened genuinely, sometimes agreeing, sometimes offering a different perspective, but always treating her thoughts as valuable. He taught her to ride with patience and humor, never mocking when she lost her balance or felt nervous around the horses. And slowly, carefully, he began to court her in earnest. It started with small gestures. A bouquet of wildflowers left on the schoolhouse steps. A book he thought she might enjoy, purchased from the general store. An invitation to watch the sunset from a high ridge where the whole valley spread out below them in twilight colors. Hannah felt herself opening like those desert flowers after rain, something long dormant coming to life. One Sunday in late September, they rode out to a place Benjamin called Echo Canyon, where rock walls rose on either side and the wind sang through the stone. They dismounted and walked along the canyon floor, the horses trailing behind on loose reins. "I need to tell you something," Benjamin said abruptly. About why I understand what you ran from." Hannah waited, sensing the weight behind his words. "Before my father died, he arranged a marriage for me, daughter of another rancher, a merger of properties more than anything else. I was expected to go through with it." Benjamin picked up a smooth stone and turned it over in his hands. "But I did not love her. I barely knew her. And the idea of spending my life with someone just because it made economic sense, someone I could not talk to the way I talked to you, it felt like a kind of death." "What did you do?" I told my father no. We had the worst fight of our lives. He said I was selfish, that I was not thinking about Cora's future or the ranch's survival. But I could not do it, Hannah. I could not marry someone just because I was supposed to. He looked at her directly. 3 months later, he died in the mine collapse. Our last conversation was that fight. He died thinking I was a disappointment. Hannah reached out and took his hand, the gesture feeling entirely natural. "You were not a disappointment. You were honest. That takes more courage than obedience. I used to think I should have just done what he wanted. That maybe if I had not fought with him so much, he would not have been distracted in the mine that day." Benjamin's voice roughened. "But then I met you, and I realized that living a lie would not have honored him. It just would have made both of us miserable." "He would be proud of you now," Hannah said firmly. "Look at what you have built. You are taking care of Cora, running a successful ranch, staying true to yourself. That is not disappointment. That is strength." Benjamin turned to face her fully, his hand tightening around hers. "I am falling in love with you, Hannah Katherine Morrison. I know I probably should not say it so plainly, that there are rules about courtship and proper timing, but I am tired of not saying what is true. You make me feel like I can be exactly who I am. No pretending, no hiding. And I want to give you the same thing. A place where you can be yourself, completely and without apology." Hannah's breath caught. She had dreamed of hearing such words, but had never believed they would come from someone who truly meant them. "I am falling in love with you too," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "You terrify me, Benjamin Irving. Why? Because this is real. What I felt for you, what we have, it is everything my father said was foolish and dangerous. He said love should be based on duty and shared values and practical considerations. But this feels like fire, like I could burn up in it. Or you could be warm for the rest of your life," Benjamin said softly. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, a gesture so gentle and reverent that Hannah felt tears prick her eyes. "I am not asking you to marry me today. I know you need time, that you need to be sure. But I am asking you to consider it. To think about a future where we build something together, where Cora gets to keep learning from you, where we get to wake up every morning and be ourselves with each other." "Yes," Hannah said, "I will consider it. But Benjamin, you need to know what you would be getting into. My father will not approve. He may even come looking for me, trying to drag me back to marry Silas Whitmore. And if he finds out about you, about us, he will do everything in his power to stop it. Let him try." There was steel beneath Benjamin's easy manner, the same strength that had allowed him to defy his own father's expectations. "You are not property, Hannah. You are a grown woman making her own choices, and if your father shows up here, he will have to deal with me." They stood in Echo Canyon as the afternoon light shifted, and Hannah felt the future rearranging itself around her. This was not the safe, suffocating life her father had planned. This was risky and real and absolutely right. The next months passed in a haze of happiness. Benjamin courted her openly now, and while some of the more conservative townspeople raised eyebrows, most seemed pleased. Margaret Turner gave her grudging approval, noting that Benjamin was a good man and Hannah could do far worse. The students noticed the change too, whispering and giggling when Benjamin came to collect Cora. when his eyes met Hannah's and held just a moment longer than necessary. In November, Benjamin asked her formally. They were at the ranch, Cora conveniently sent to visit a friend in town, and he led Hannah to the porch where they could see the stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. He knelt, which surprised her since she had not expected such traditional gestures from him, and pulled out a simple gold band. "This was my mother's," he said. "She died when I was 16, but I remember how she and my father were before the bitterness set in." They laughed together. They talked like partners. She never let him make her smaller than she was. "That is what I want for us, Hannah, a partnership, a life where we both get to be fully ourselves." "Yes," Hannah said, no hesitation, no doubt. "Yes, I will marry you." He slipped the ring on her finger and it fit perfectly, as though it had been waiting for her all along. Then he stood and kissed her, and Hannah felt the last chains of expectation fall away. This was choice. This was freedom. This was love. They set the wedding for January, giving Hannah time to finish the fall semester and make arrangements for a temporary teacher while she was on her brief honeymoon. She wrote to her mother, a careful letter explaining that she had met someone and was getting married. She did not write to her father, unsure what to say, how to bridge the chasm between who he wanted her to be and who she had become. Her mother's response arrived 3 weeks later, and Hannah opened it with trembling hands. The letter was short and carefully worded, clearly written when her father was not home. "My dear daughter, I am pleased you have found happiness. I always knew you had too much spirit for the life your father envisioned. I wish I could come to your wedding, but you understand why I cannot. Know that I love you and I am proud of your courage. Your grandmother would be too. Be well, my Hannah. Be free." Hannah cried when she read it, not from sadness but from the bittersweet ache of being seen by her mother, perhaps for the first time. She showed the letter to Benjamin that evening, and he held her while she wept and then laughed and then wept again. "She understands," Hannah said. "She may not be able to stand with me, but she understands." "Then she is wiser than my father was," Benjamin said, "and you carry her blessing. That matters." But understanding, as it turned out, was not universal. 2 weeks before the wedding, Hannah was closing up the schoolhouse on a Friday afternoon when a familiar voice stopped her cold. "So this is where you have been hiding." She turned to find her father standing in the doorway, still dressed in his black preacher's suit despite the desert heat. Reverend Tobias Morrison looked older than she remembered, his hair grayer, his face more lined. But his eyes held the same unbending certainty that had governed her entire childhood. "Father." Her voice came out steady, though her heart raced. "How did you find me? Did you think you could simply disappear?" He stepped into the schoolhouse, his gaze taking in the books, the slates, the evidence of her new life. "Silas Whitmore has been quite distressed by your abandonment. He is a forgiving man, however. He is willing to overlook this foolishness if you return immediately and proceed with the wedding." "I am not returning, and I am not marrying Silas Whitmore." Hannah lifted her chin. "I am marrying someone else, a good man who respects me." Her father's expression hardened. "I have heard about this rancher, a man barely scraping by with no education, no position in the church. You would throw away your future for someone like that. He is not someone like that. His name is Benjamin Irving, and he is 10 times the man Silas Whitmore will ever be." Hannah felt her old anger rising, but beneath it was something new, certainty. "I am not a child anymore, Father. You cannot command me. I can and I will." Tobias Morrison moved closer, his voice dropping to the tone he used for private rebukes. "You are my daughter. You owe me obedience. You owe your family respect. This rebellion ends now, Hannah. You will pack your things and you will come home with me tomorrow." "No." The single word hung in the air between them. Hannah saw shock flicker across her father's face, as though he genuinely had not conceived of the possibility that she would refuse. "What did you say?" I said no. "I am not coming home. I am not marrying Silas. I am building a life here, Father, a life that is mine. I am sorry if that disappoints you, but I cannot live for your approval anymore." "You ungrateful, foolish girl." Her father's voice rose, echoing in the empty schoolhouse. "Do you have any idea what you are throwing away? Respectability, security, a place in proper society. For what? To teach brats in a backwater mining town, to marry some cowboy who will work you into an early grave, to be myself." Hannah's voice shook but did not break. "To love someone who values my mind as much as my obedience. To wake up every morning and not feel like I am suffocating. This is not love. This is infatuation, childish rebellion. You will regret it, Hannah. When the novelty wears off and you are stuck in poverty, raising children in some shack, you will remember this moment and hate yourself for your choice. Then that will be my mistake to make." Hannah felt tears building but refused to let them fall. "I am sorry I am not the daughter you wanted. But I cannot be her anymore. It was killing me, Father. Can you not see that for a moment?" Something flickered in Tobias Morrison's eyes, something that might have been pain or understanding. But it vanished quickly, replaced by cold resolve. "If you go through with this wedding, you are no longer my daughter. I will not acknowledge you or your husband. You will be dead to me." The words should have hurt more than they did. Perhaps Hannah had been preparing for them on some level since the moment she boarded the stage out of Carson City. "I understand," she said quietly. "Goodbye, Father." He stared at her for a long moment, clearly waiting for her to break, to apologize, to retreat into the obedient daughter he remembered. When she did not, he turned on his heel and walked out, his footsteps heavy on the wooden floor. Hannah stood alone in the schoolhouse, shaking. She had done it. She had chosen herself, chosen Benjamin, chosen the life she wanted rather than the life she was supposed to want. It felt both liberating and devastating, like cutting away a part of herself that had been diseased but was still, fundamentally, part of her. She did not know how long she stood there before she heard new footsteps. Benjamin appeared in the doorway, his face concerned. "Cora said she saw your father in town. Did he come here?" Hannah nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Benjamin crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. She buried her face in his chest and finally let the tears come, great racking sobs that shook her whole body. "What did he say?" Benjamin asked when she could breathe again. "That if I marry you, I am dead to him. No longer his daughter." She felt Benjamin's arms tighten around her. "Hannah, if you want to wait, if you need time to try to make peace with him, I will understand. I do not want to be the reason you lose your family. You are not the reason." Hannah pulled back to look at him, this man who would offer to wait even though it meant risking losing her. "He is the reason. His inability to see me as anything other than an extension of his will. I love you, Benjamin. I want to marry you. If that means losing him, then I have already lost him anyway. He lost me the moment he tried to force me into a life I did not choose. Are you sure?" "I have never been more sure of anything." Benjamin kissed her forehead, gentle and reverent. "Then we will face it together. You and me and Cora. We will build our own family, one based on choice and respect and love. The real kind, not the kind that comes with conditions." That night, alone in her small quarters, Hannah took out pen and paper. She wrote a final letter to her mother, explaining what had happened, asking her to understand. Then she wrote to her father, not because she expected him to change, but because she needed to say certain things while she still could. She told him she was sorry for his pain but not for her choice. She told him she would always be grateful for the education he had given her, even if he had not intended her to use it the way she had. And she told him she hoped, someday, he might find it in his heart to forgive her for being herself. She sealed both letters and mailed them the next morning. Whether her father would ever read his, she did not know. But at least she had tried. The wedding took place on a brilliantly clear January day in 1884, cold but beautiful, the desert air crisp and clean. They married in Pastor Wells' small church, with half the town in attendance. Cora stood up as Hannah's bridesmaid, her face glowing with happiness. Margaret Turner dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. The students, given the afternoon off, sat in the front pews and grinned. Hannah wore a simple white dress that she had sewn herself, with lace at the collar and sleeves. Benjamin wore his best suit, his hair neatly combed, his eyes never leaving her face as she walked down the aisle. There was no one to give her away, no father to place her hand in Benjamin's, but somehow that felt right. She was giving herself, making her own choice, stepping into this new life of her own free will. Pastor Wells kept the ceremony short and sweet, focusing on partnership and mutual respect rather than wifely obedience. When Benjamin slipped the gold band onto her finger for the second time, Hannah felt a sense of rightness settle deep in her bones. This was where she belonged, with this man in this town, building this life. "I love you," Benjamin whispered as they kissed, and the congregation erupted in applause and cheers. The reception was held in the church hall, with food contributed by half the town. There was music and dancing, and Hannah found herself laughing more freely than she ever had in her father's house. She danced with Benjamin, with the miners and ranchers who had welcomed her, with Pastor Wells, and even with some of her older students who blushed and stumbled over their own feet. As the evening wound down and the stars came out, Benjamin borrowed a horse and buggy, and they rode out to the ranch that was now her home. Cora had agreed to spend the night with Margaret Turner, giving them privacy. The house was dark when they arrived, but Benjamin had left a fire laid in the hearth, and he lit it quickly, filling the room with warm light. "Welcome home, Mrs. Irving," he said, and Hannah felt a thrill run through her at the name. Not because it marked her as property, but because it marked her as chosen, as belonging to this family she had found rather than the one she had been born into. They made love slowly, tenderly, Benjamin careful and patient with her inexperience. Afterward, lying in his arms in the bed they would now share, Hannah felt a peace she had not known was possible. This was what love should be. Not duty or obligation, not the surrender of self, but the finding of self in another person who saw you clearly and loved what they saw. "Are you happy?" Benjamin asked, his hand tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "More than I knew how to be," Hannah said. "Are you?" "I am complete," he said simply. "Like I was waiting my whole life for you to walk into it." They fell asleep tangled together, and Hannah's last thought before sleep claimed her was that she had finally found home. The months that followed were busy and full. Hannah continued teaching, though she moved into the ranch house, making the commute each morning in the wagon. Benjamin insisted she learn to drive herself. Cora bloomed under the stability of having a sister-in-law who encouraged her curiosity, and the three of them settled into a comfortable rhythm. Benjamin worked the ranch, Hannah taught, and in the evenings they came together to share meals and stories and plans for the future. In March, Hannah realized she was pregnant. She told Benjamin on a Sunday afternoon as they sat on the porch watching the cattle graze. His reaction was pure joy, sweeping her up and spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to put her down. "We are going to be parents," he said, wonder in his voice. "Hannah, we are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" She already knew the answer but needed to hear it anyway. I am terrified and thrilled and so grateful I could burst, Benjamin said. When? October, I think. Maybe late September. He pulled her close, his hand settling protectively over her still flat stomach. I am going to be a father, a real one, not like mine. I am going to teach our child to think and question and be exactly who they are meant to be. We both will, Hannah said, covering his hand with hers. Boy or girl, they will know they are loved for themselves, not for who they are supposed to be. Hannah taught through the spring term, though she had to train a replacement teacher for the fall when her pregnancy would be too advanced to continue. She hated giving up the work she loved, but Benjamin assured her it was temporary. Once the baby is older, you can teach again if you want. Or you can teach from home. Or you can do something entirely different. This is not the end of your life, Hannah. It is just a new chapter. The baby came in late September, a long and difficult labor that left Hannah exhausted and Benjamin frantic with worry. But when the midwife finally placed the squalling infant in her arms, every moment of pain vanished. They had a son, red-faced and healthy, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that would eventually turn the same blue as his father's. What should we name him? Benjamin asked, his voice thick with emotion as he touched his son's tiny hand. Hannah thought of her grandmother, the one who had left her the inheritance that allowed her to escape, who had always told her quietly to follow her own path. Daniel, she said. Daniel Matthew Irving. After strong men who stood up for what they believed. Daniel, Benjamin repeated, trying it out. Hello, Daniel. Welcome to the world, son. You have no idea how wanted you are. Cora adored her nephew, hovering constantly and begging to hold him. Hannah watched her with the baby and saw how naturally she took to the role of aunt, how gently she supported his head and sang him soft songs. At 14, Cora was already showing signs of the remarkable woman she would become, still hungry for knowledge but also kind and nurturing. Life settled into a new rhythm. Hannah spent her days caring for Daniel, but she also carved out time to read and write, to help Cora with her studies, to remain herself even as she grew into this new role of mother. Benjamin was a devoted father, walking the floor with Daniel at night when he fussed, changing diapers without complaint, marveling at every new expression that crossed his son's face. I keep thinking about your father, Benjamin said one night when Daniel was 3 months old, sleeping finally after an hour of crying. Wondering if he knows he has a grandson, if he cares. I wonder too, Hannah admitted. She had not heard from her father since that confrontation in the schoolhouse, though her mother sent occasional short letters, carefully neutral, clearly written in secret. But I cannot live my life waiting for his approval. I have to believe we are doing the right thing, raising Daniel in a home full of love and honesty. We are, Benjamin said firmly. Look at him, Hannah. Look at what we made together. That is not a mistake. That is a miracle. When Daniel was 6 months old, Hannah received a letter that made her hands shake as she opened it. The handwriting was her mother's, but the message was urgent. Your father is ill. The doctor says perhaps a few months. I do not ask you to come, but I thought you should know. He speaks of you sometimes when he is feverish. I think he has regrets, though he will never say so. Be well, my darling. Love your family fiercely. That is all any of us can do. Hannah showed the letter to Benjamin that evening. I do not know if I should go, she said. Part of me wants to give him the chance to meet Daniel to see that I am happy, but part of me fears he will just hurt me again, reject us again. What does your heart tell you to do? Hannah thought about it, really sat with the question. My heart says to go, not for him but for me. So I do not spend the rest of my life wondering if I should have tried one more time. Then we will all go, Benjamin said. As a family, if he wants to see you, he sees all of us. You do not face him alone. They made the journey to Carson City in April, when the roads were passable and Daniel was old enough to travel without too much difficulty. Cora stayed at the ranch, managing things with the help of a trusted ranch hand. Hannah's nerves increased with every mile, not knowing what they would find, whether her father would even agree to see her. Carson City looked exactly as she remembered it, the streets familiar and foreign all at once. They found lodging at a modest hotel, and Hannah sent word to her parents' home that she was in town. Her mother arrived within hours, rushing into the hotel room and embracing Hannah with tears streaming down her face. "Let me see you," Elizabeth Morrison said, holding Hannah at arm's length. "Oh, you look so well, so happy." Her gaze fell on Benjamin, who stood holding Daniel, and her expression softened further. "And this must be your husband and your son. Mother, this is Benjamin Irving, and this is Daniel." Hannah took the baby from Benjamin's arms and placed him in her mother's. "Your grandson." Elizabeth looked down at the baby and something in her face crumpled. "He is beautiful. Oh, Hannah, he is perfect." They spent an hour talking, Elizabeth asking careful questions about Hannah's life, marveling at Daniel's chubby cheeks and bright eyes. Finally, Hannah asked the question that had brought her here. "Will Father see me?" Elizabeth's expression grew pained. "I do not know. He is very weak, Hannah. The illness has taken so much from him, but I will ask. I will tell him you are here with your husband and child, and I will ask." She left, promising to return with an answer. Benjamin took Hannah's hand as they waited, Daniel sleeping peacefully in the cradle the hotel had provided. "Whatever happens, you tried. That is what matters." Elizabeth returned as the sun was setting. "He will see you," she said quietly. "Just you." "Tomorrow afternoon." Hannah's heart sank. "Not Benjamin, not Daniel," he said, "just you. I am sorry, darling. It is the best I could negotiate." Hannah looked at Benjamin, who nodded. "Go, talk to him. We will be here when you are done." The next afternoon, Hannah walked the familiar path to her childhood home, her heart pounding. The house looked smaller than she remembered, shabbier. She knocked, and her mother opened the door, eyes red from crying. "He is in the bedroom," Elizabeth said. "Hannah, be gentle. He is not the man you remember." Her father lay in the bed where Hannah had been conceived, where her mother had given birth to 2 stillborn babies after Hannah, where sickness and death had always seemed to hover. He looked ancient, his skin yellowed and stretched tight over his bones, his breathing labored, but his eyes, when they focused on her, were still sharp. "Hannah," he said, his voice a shadow of its former power. "Father." She approached the bed slowly, unsure whether to sit or stand. Finally, she pulled a chair close and settled into it, her hands folded in her lap. They looked at each other for a long moment. Then Tobias said, "Your mother tells me you have a son." "Yes, Daniel. He is 6 months old." "And your husband, this rancher, Benjamin. He is a good man, Father. A kind man who treats me as an equal." Tobias closed his eyes briefly. "I was too hard on you." Hannah's breath caught. She had not expected anything close to an admission, let alone this. "I wanted you to be safe," her father continued, his voice growing weaker. "I thought Silas could provide that. Security, respectability. I did not understand that safety without happiness is just another kind of prison." Tears spilled down Hannah's cheeks. "Father, let me finish." He opened his eyes again, focusing on her with effort. "I have been thinking these past months about my own father. He wanted me to be a farmer to take over his land, but I wanted to preach. We fought terribly about it. I told myself I was different, that I understood the importance of following God's calling. But with you, I did the same thing he did to me. I tried to force you into a mold you did not fit. You were trying to protect me. I was trying to control you. There is a difference." Tobias coughed, a wet rattling sound. "I have been a fool, Hannah, a proud, stubborn fool. And now I am dying and I cannot make it right." "You can meet your grandson," Hannah said urgently. "You can meet Benjamin. We are staying at the Union Hotel. Please, Father, let me bring them here." Tobias was quiet for so long that Hannah thought he had fallen asleep. Then he nodded, just barely. "Tomorrow. Bring them tomorrow." Hannah left the room and found her mother waiting in the hallway. They embraced, both crying, and Elizabeth whispered, "Thank you for trying. Thank you for being the bigger person." The next day, Hannah returned to her childhood home with Benjamin and Daniel. Her father was propped up on pillows, dressed in a clean nightshirt, his hair combed. Benjamin approached the bed with Daniel in his arms, no fear or resentment in his manner, just calm dignity. "Sir," Benjamin said, "I am honored to meet you." Tobias looked at this young man who had stolen his daughter away, and Hannah saw his expression shift as he took in Benjamin's honest face, the gentle way he held the baby. "You love her more than my own life," Benjamin said simply, "and you let her teach. Let her have her own mind. I encourage it. She is brilliant, sir. Why would I want to dim that light?" Something that might have been respect flickered in Tobias's eyes. He looked at the baby in Benjamin's arms. "May I hold him?" Benjamin carefully transferred Daniel to the old man's arms. Tobias looked down at his grandson with an expression Hannah had never seen on his face before, wonder mixed with sorrow. Daniel, awake and alert, gazed back at his grandfather with solemn blue eyes. "He has your mouth, Hannah," Tobias said quietly, "and your mother's eyes. He will be handsome and clever, I think. A formidable combination." He paused. "What are you teaching him?" "To think for himself," Hannah said. "To be kind, to ask questions, to build a life that is true to who he is, not who others expect him to be." Tobias nodded slowly. "That is good. That is right." He looked up at Hannah, tears running down his weathered cheeks. "I am proud of you. I should have said it long ago, but I am proud of the woman you have become. Forgive me for not seeing it sooner." "I forgive you," Hannah said, and meant it. The anger that had burned in her for so long had transmuted into something softer, more like grief for what might have been. "I forgive you, Father." He died 2 weeks later with Elizabeth by his side. Hannah and Benjamin stayed in Carson City for the funeral, and Hannah stood beside her mother as they lowered Tobias Morrison into the ground. Pastor Martin, who had worked alongside her father for years, gave a eulogy that focused on Tobias's dedication to his flock, his fierce belief in right and wrong. Hannah did not speak, but she held her mother's hand and felt the complicated weight of grief for a flawed man who had, at the very end, tried to do better. After the funeral, Elizabeth pulled Hannah aside. "Come home with me," she said. "Just for a few days. I want to know my grandson properly. And I want to tell you things about your father, things you should know." They spent 3 days together, the two women and the baby, while Benjamin discreetly gave them space. Elizabeth talked about her own youth, about falling in love with Tobias when he was young and passionate about his calling, before bitterness and rigidity had hardened him. She talked about the baby she had lost, about how Tobias had blamed himself, had thrown himself into his work and his rules as a way of controlling an uncontrollable world. And she talked about the letters Tobias had written to Hannah but never sent, letters expressing his confusion and hurt and slowly growing understanding. "He loved you," Elizabeth said. "He just did not know how to love you without trying to shape you. It was his great failing." "Will you come visit us?" Hannah asked. "In Tonopah Junction, see where we have built our life." Elizabeth smiled. "I would like that very much." They returned to Nevada in early May, the desert blooming with unexpected flowers after spring rains. The ranch looked welcoming after their time away, and Cora greeted them with exuberant hugs and 1,000 questions. Hannah settled back into her life with a sense of completion. She had made peace with her father, had introduced her family to her mother, had closed a chapter that had been left painfully open. Over the next years, their life grew and deepened. Hannah returned to teaching when Daniel was 2, bringing him with her to the schoolhouse, where he played quietly while she instructed the older children. Cora finished her education with honors and chose to attend a teacher's college in San Francisco, funded partly by Benjamin and partly by a scholarship her high marks had earned. She wrote long letters home, full of excitement about her classes and her growing passion for education reform. Hannah and Benjamin had 2 more children, daughters born in 1887 and 1889, both as bright and curious as their brother. The ranch prospered, Benjamin's hard work and smart management paying off as his herd grew and the demand for beef increased. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, with enough to eat and a solid roof over their heads and books on the shelves for the children to devour. Elizabeth visited twice a year, delighting in her grandchildren, marveling at the life Hannah had created. On her 3rd visit, she confessed that she was considering moving to Tonopah Junction permanently. "There is nothing for me in Carson City anymore," she said, "just memories. But here, I have family, a life that is still unfolding." She made the move in 1890, settling into a small house in town and becoming a beloved figure to Hannah's students, who called her grandmother Morrison and sought her out for advice and stories. Having her mother close filled a hole Hannah had not realized was still tender. They could talk freely now, without the shadow of Tobias's judgment, and Hannah learned to see her mother as a complete person, not just the silent figure who had stood behind her father all those years. In 1895, when Daniel was 10 years old and already showing signs of being as tall as his father, Cora returned to Tonopah Junction with a teaching degree and a proposal. She wanted to open a school for girls, one that would offer advanced education beyond the basics most frontier schools provided. Benjamin and Hannah helped her secure funding and a building, and the Irving Academy for Young Women opened its doors that fall with 12 students. Hannah taught there part-time, working alongside Cora to create the kind of educational environment they had both dreamed of. They taught literature and mathematics and science, but also practical skills like bookkeeping and negotiation, preparing their students to make their own ways in the world. It was exhausting and exhilarating, watching young minds open to possibility, seeing girls realize they could be more than just wives and mothers if they chose. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Benjamin took Hannah back to Echo Canyon, the place where he had first told her he was falling in love. They rode out on a spring morning, just the 2 of them, their children safely in Elizabeth's care. The canyon looked exactly as it had that first time, eternal and unchanged despite the years that had reshaped their lives. "You have any regrets?" Benjamin asked as they dismounted and walked hand in hand through the canyon. Hannah considered the question seriously. "I regret that my father and I lost so many years to stubbornness and pride, but I do not regret leaving. I do not regret choosing you. Every good thing in my life came from that decision. Even the hard parts, especially the hard parts, they taught me who I really am." She turned to face him, this man who had given her the space to become herself. "What about you? Do you regret marrying a preacher's daughter who could not cook and had no idea how to run a ranch?" Benjamin laughed. "You learned to cook just fine. And as for the ranch, you have ideas I never would have thought of. That irrigation system you designed. We have the best grazing land in the county now." He pulled her close. "I regret nothing, Hannah Irving. You are the best decision I ever made." They kissed in the shadow of the canyon walls, and Hannah felt the same spark that had ignited 15 years ago. This was what love looked like after a decade and a half. Not just passion. though that remained but deep friendship and mutual respect, and the comfortable knowledge that they were building something lasting. As their children grew, Hannah and Benjamin talked often about what they wanted to pass on to them. Not rules or rigid expectations, but values. Integrity, curiosity, compassion, courage to forge your own path. Daniel showed an aptitude for ranching and a love of the land, but he also loved books and music. Their eldest daughter, Sarah, was mechanically inclined, always taking things apart to see how they worked, asking questions about engineering and physics that stumped even Hannah. Their youngest, Emma, had her father's quiet strength and her mother's gift for teaching, already helping the younger children at school even though she was only 6. "We are raising them to leave us," Benjamin observed one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors. "To go out and be whoever they are meant to be." "That is how it should be," Hannah said. "We do not own them. We just get the privilege of launching them into the world. Your father never understood that." "No, but I do, we do, and they will carry that forward however they choose to live." In 1898, when Hannah was 35 years old, Margaret Turner retired from her position as head of the school board and convinced Hannah to take over. It was a role that required diplomacy and vision, balancing the needs of the community with the importance of quality education. Hannah threw herself into the work, advocating for better supplies, higher pay for teachers, expanded curriculum. She met resistance from some of the more conservative families, but she had learned from her years in Tonopah Junction that persistence and logic could move mountains. Benjamin supported her fully, even when it meant she was away from home more, attending meetings and advocating for changes. He picked up the slack without complaint, cooking dinners and helping with homework, and never once suggesting that her work was less important than his. Their marriage had become a true partnership, each supporting the other's dreams and ambitions. Cora married at 30, choosing a fellow teacher from a neighboring town, a kind man who shared her passion for education. The wedding was a joyous affair, held at the ranch with half of Tonopah Junction in attendance. Hannah stood up as matron of honor and watched her sister-in-law marry for love, for partnership, for the same reasons Hannah herself had chosen Benjamin all those years ago. As the new century dawned, Hannah found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. From the suffocating parsonage in Carson City to this life of purpose and love and freedom. She was a wife, a mother, a teacher, a school board director, but more than any of those roles, she was herself. Fully and completely herself, with all her questions and opinions and fierce belief that people should be allowed to become whoever they were meant to be. In 1902, Hannah received a letter that made her cry. It was from a former student, now a young woman of 20, writing to say that she had just been accepted to medical school in San Francisco. "You told me I could be anything I worked hard enough to become," the letter said. "You believed in me when no one else did. I am going to be a doctor, Miss Morrison, excuse me, Mrs. Irving. And it is because you showed me that women could have minds and dreams and ambitions. Thank you." Hannah showed the letter to Benjamin that night, her voice breaking. "This is why I left Carson City, for moments like this, for the chance to help someone else find their wings. You have changed so many lives," Benjamin said, wrapping his arms around her. "Not just your students, Cora, our children, me. You changed all of us by refusing to be less than you are." Daniel left for university in 1903, studying agriculture and animal husbandry, planning to come back and expand the ranch in new directions. Sarah, at 14, was already talking about attending technical college, about becoming an engineer. Emma showed signs of following in Hannah's footsteps into teaching. Elizabeth, now in her 70s, remained sharp and engaged, still telling stories to the schoolchildren, still writing weekly letters to Cora. On a summer evening in 1904, as Hannah and Benjamin sat on their porch watching their daughters play in the yard, Benjamin said quietly, "We did it, you know. We built something real, something good." Hannah leaned her head on his shoulder. "We did. Not because we followed anyone else's rules, but because we made our own. Your father would be proud of you now, of all of this." "Maybe," Hannah said. "I hope so. But it matters more that I am proud of myself, that I know I lived true to my own heart." As the years continued to unfold, Hannah and Benjamin grew older together with Grace. They became grandparents when Daniel married and had children of his own, bringing his family back to Tonopah Junction to help run the expanding ranch. Sarah did become an engineer, one of the first women in Nevada to earn such a degree, and returned to design irrigation systems and mining equipment improvements. Emma opened a school of her own in a neighboring town, carrying forward the educational philosophy Hannah and Cora had pioneered. In 1915, on their 30th wedding anniversary, the town of Tonopah Junction held a celebration in honor of Hannah and Benjamin Irving. Pastor Wells, now elderly himself, spoke about their contributions to the community. Former students, some now parents themselves, talked about how Hannah had changed their lives. Cora gave a speech about the partnership of equals that her brother and sister-in-law had modeled, about what it meant to build a marriage on mutual respect rather than hierarchy. Hannah stood before the assembled crowd, Benjamin's hand warm in hers, and felt the weight of 30 years of choices. Every risk, every moment of courage, every time she had chosen authenticity over approval had led to this. A life rich with love and purpose and impact. "When I came to Tonopah Junction in 1883, she said, her voice carrying across the church hall, "I was running from a life that felt like a cage. I did not know what I would find here, but I found freedom. I found purpose. I found a man who let me be myself without apology." She squeezed Benjamin's hand. "And I found that the most important thing we can do in this world is give that same gift to others. The freedom to become themselves, whether we are teaching children or raising our own families or building a marriage, that is the work that matters. Not forcing people into molds they do not fit, but giving them the space to discover who they truly are." The applause was thunderous. People stood, some crying, many smiling with the kind of joy that comes from witnessing a life well lived. Hannah looked out at the faces before her, at the students she had taught, and the children she had raised and the community she had helped shape, and felt complete. Elizabeth Morrison passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1917 at the age of 78. She had lived her final years surrounded by the family she had fought so hard to protect, and Hannah held her hand as she slipped away, whispering gratitude for a mother who had always understood, even when she could not say so aloud. In the following years, as America changed and modernized around them, Hannah and Benjamin remained constants for their family and community. They adapted when they needed to, held fast to principles that mattered, and continued to demonstrate through their daily lives what it meant to love without conditions or expectations. On a spring morning in 1925, when Hannah was 62 and Benjamin 67, they rode out once more to Echo Canyon. It was harder now, their bodies bearing the marks of decades of hard work and high-altitude living, but they made the journey anyway, needing to return to the place where their love story had truly begun. 40 years, Benjamin said as they stood in the canyon, their horses grazing nearby. "We have been doing this for 40 years. 41 if you count from when we met," Hannah corrected with a smile, and I would do every single one of them again. Even the hard parts, the fights with your father, the years when money was tight, the times we struggled, especially those parts. They made everything else sweeter. Hannah took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his as naturally as breathing. You gave me the greatest gift anyone can give another person, Benjamin. You let me be free. And in that freedom I found not just myself but us, this life we built together. I did not give you freedom, Benjamin said gently. You took it. You were brave enough to run, to risk everything, to choose your own path. I just had the good sense to walk beside you. They stood together in Echo Canyon, two people who had defied expectations and built something lasting. Around them, the desert bloomed with spring flowers, proof that even in the harshest conditions, beautiful things could grow. And as the wind sang through the canyon walls, carrying echoes of all the words of love and partnership they had spoken over the decades, Hannah knew with absolute certainty that every choice she had made, every moment of courage, every time she had refused to be less than herself, had been worth it. Their children thrived, their grandchildren grew, and the legacy they built together extended far beyond their own lives. In classrooms across Nevada, teachers trained by Hannah and Cora taught students to think critically and dream boldly. On ranches and farms, practices Benjamin had pioneered increased yields and sustainability. And in countless homes, marriages built on the model of mutual respect and partnership that the Irvings had demonstrated showed that love could be both passionate and equal, romantic and practical, enduring and ever-renewing. Hannah and Benjamin lived into their 70s, surrounded by family and community, their love story becoming the stuff of local legend. When they were gone, the preacher who eulogized them spoke not of duty or obligation but of choice and courage, of two people who had dared to build a life based on authenticity rather than expectation. And in the schoolhouse that still bore Hannah's name, young girls continued to learn that they could be anything they worked hard enough to become, that questions were more valuable than easy answers, and that the greatest adventure of all was the journey to discover who you truly were. Because a preacher's daughter who had run from expectations and a cowboy who had let her be herself had proven, through 41 years of love and partnership, that freedom and love were not contradictory but complementary, and that the best life was the one you chose for yourself. The town of Tonopah Junction continued to grow and change, but the Irving legacy remained constant. A reminder that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to be who others expect you to be, and that real love does not ask you to be smaller or quieter or less than you are. It asks only that you be yourself, fully and courageously, and promises to stand beside you while you do. And so the story of Hannah Katherine Morrison Irving and Benjamin Lawrence Irving became more than just a love story. It became a testament to the power of choice, the importance of partnership, and the beauty of a life lived authentically. Their ranch house stood for generations, a landmark reminding passers-by that in the wild Nevada desert, two people had planted roots deep enough to weather any storm, and had grown a love that flourished in even the harshest conditions. Their great-grandchildren would grow up hearing stories of the preacher's daughter who ran away to teach, and the cowboy rancher who saw her brilliance and never tried to dim it. They would learn that real strength lies not in forcing others to conform, but in giving them space to become themselves. And they would carry forward the values that Hannah and Benjamin had lived so fully: courage, authenticity, mutual respect, and the unwavering belief that every person deserves the freedom to write their own story. In the end, that was the truest measure of their love. Not just what they had built together, though that was remarkable, but what they had given to everyone around them. permission to be free to choose to become. And that gift, like their love, proved to be eternal, rippling outward through generations, touching lives in ways they could never have imagined when they first met in a dusty Nevada schoolhouse in 1883. The wind still sings through Echo Canyon, carrying on its voice the memory of two people who loved each other enough to let each other be free, and in that freedom found the deepest possible connection. Their story reminds us that the greatest love stories are not about possession or control, but about liberation and partnership. About seeing someone completely, accepting them fully, and choosing to walk beside them as they become whoever they are meant to be. And in Tonopah Junction, Nevada, where the desert meets the sky and dreams take root in unlikely soil, the legacy of Hannah and Benjamin Irving continues to inspire anyone brave enough to run from expectations and courageous enough to love without conditions. Their story proves that sometimes the most radical act is simply being yourself, and that the deepest love comes when someone sees you clearly and loves not in spite of who you are, but because of it.